Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to SB Interviews, where today, for the 17th installment, I will be chatting to a lovely musician named Tash Hagz, aka Mike Shields. If we switch over to here, we have the man on the screen right now. How are you going, Mike? You're right.
Hi Logan, I'm really good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Feel free to introduce yourself and your music to the audience.
So my name is Mike Shields. I go by the name Tash Hagz. I write and record pretty much all of the music myself. I have a producer, shout out to Eden Altman, who maybe we'll get onto how I met up with him a few years back. I do essentially progressive rock, alt rock, classic rock music, authentic music played and written on real instruments in the main.
Well, you've answered about half of the questions I had for you today, straight off the bat.
See you then.
You sound like you've kind of got the complete package. You do have a producer on board, but you're responsible for writing and performing most of your own music and everything like that. And you've got a clear sort of identity for your tunes. What songs have you released at the moment?
So far, I've just released my fourth official track. I did two last year and I've done two this year of varying styles. It's under the kind of moniker, if you like, of psychedelic rock, sort of psychedelic rock, but also there's a bit of a neo-punk, post-punk vibe to it. I'm, by my own admission, no spring chicken. I reached 50 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you kindly. It was an interesting birthday party in lockdown, as you can imagine. And I have been writing music since I was in my teenage years. And it has really taken quite some time for me to get out there and get the confidence to think that, this stuff that I'm writing and producing does have value, that other people will be able to enjoy the music. And I think secondly, to be able to get things in real life. I've got a job, I've got family, I've got dependents. They all come first. And whilst this is kind of a hobby, it's also kind of the thing that I like to work hard at. And so, two songs last year, one called Images of Imaging, one called Mankind and Destiny, and then two songs this year. I've just very recently released a song called The Ballad of Sana Lee.
Excellent. And how would you describe the differences between the individual tracks?
Gosh, Images of Imaging is the most recently written song and is probably, in terms of critical acclaim, it's the one that seems to get the most love. And indeed, it's my most streamed song on Spotify. And it's, as I say, it's kind of psychedelic. It starts off with a harpsichord intro and it builds up as the track progresses. I also like to add, as best I can, kind of lush atmospheric harmonies to pad out the sound, whereas Dependent On is much more it's got a kind of Tomorrow Never Knows persistent drum beat throughout, kind of that builds. It's got a different bass. There's three verses. Each verse has got a completely different bass line, and we tried to get the drums to kind of sit with the bass line that I put down. I think it's difficult. I've had some sort of underground music blog press and articles. Nobody that most people has heard of, but that doesn't matter, because getting the feedback from people who aren't your friends, aren't your family, don't have any reason to tell you anything that they think you want to know, is so huge in terms of understanding where you are on the compass, if you like. Because until I'd actually put stuff out there, sure, and I think other musicians will relate to this, you can speak to your friends and your family, and they're always going to love it because they love you. And that's not what it's all about, is it?
You got to kind of hear that really rough feedback occasionally, if it's there. I mean, I reviewed your music. I didn't have any massive complaints with what you did. What is the overall feedback like? Have you received, I think I read that, who is it? Victor James? Victor James?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What was the deal with that? That was pretty amazing from what I read.
Yes, so Victor James is a Grammy-nominated music producer from the States. He's done, I think he did some work with Lady Gaga, and through a variety of contacts, I managed to get an audience with him purely to send a song that will be released. I released, my first actual release was in 2014, a song called Into My Arms, and I put it out there. I didn't put it on Spotify, it's on SoundCloud, Bandcamp and stuff. And I sent a copy of the MP3 to Victor, who did a really critical analysis of it. He spent about 15 minutes going through it. He put it into his DAW and assessed it, not unlike yourself, really, in terms of the last stuff that we worked on. Just, pressed record and went through the song, very complimentary about the song, even though it's not really in the same, I don't think in the same standard as the stuff that I've been releasing more recently. And he was just really dug it. Gave me some good critical feedback. That particular track, when I first had it professionally mixed and mastered before I met Edan, it didn't start with a hook. It was too long. I think it was about 1:20 before the chorus came in. And little things like this, you realize that particularly nowadays in the streaming generation, it's like, let's not bore us, get to the chorus. And that's what he took. Both Victor and some other mastering engineers were like saying, yeah, it's a great song, this, but you need to kick it in more. And it's like, now it's so obvious that you need to have, you can't have big long run-ups to big long intros, or I mean you can if that's your bag, but in terms of trying to generate some eardrops, is that the right phrase? That, not eardrops, but to get listens, you want to capture as soon as you can, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic because you've talked. First of all, what is psychedelic? How would you describe psychedelic music? Because I've been wondering about that.
Gosh, well, the psychedelic movement, it's the late 60s, the counterculture, the music that was off the beaten path. Indeed, I mean, it was off the beaten path, although it was kind of on the beaten path at a short period in the late 60s when you had bands. The Beatles kind of started it off with, not just the Beatles, but they were the biggest band that kind of flew with that label. But then you've got the Doors, you've got all sorts, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, and it all lends itself into the kind of sort of trippy graphics that they have. There's a particular style in terms of the way that the fonts and the different colors. Of course, it emanates from the notion of taking illicit drugs, LSD or magic mushrooms or smoking pot, and which was a lot of things that the Beatles and all the other people, on the West Coast of the States did, and it kind of gave them an insight into how to expand their musical universe, if you like. And as I say, Pink Floyd built upon it. Even Led Zeppelin, there was stuff there. So it's not a modern day thing. And it was interesting because one of the critics that reviewed the latest single had said something along the lines of, "Oh, it's a bold person who decides to go down the psychedelic rock route. Very few people would stray into that territory anymore." And it's like, I'm not sure where you're coming from. There's a massive psychedelic rock scene if you know where to look for it. The Flaming Lips, Tame Impala. It crosses into prog rock as well. And for me, I think that I was watching, I don't know if you've seen the YouTube channel Muse Formation. It's a guy, he's a producer. He's very critical of a lot of the sort of music gurus out there. I'm not going to mention any names. And indeed, he doesn't either. But he kind of only recently kind of taught me that I need to really niche down into a particular genre. It's all very well me saying I started off in 2014. I was like, yeah, I'm alternative rock, I'm indie rock. It's like, well, that's massive. That could be, I don't know, bands like Arctic Monkeys, for example, there's a whole host of different bands out there, big bands. And once I started to realize that, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and my music is of that sort of late Beatles era, but I do try to put some modern context to it. And again, that's some of the feedback that I've had, that there is a kind of modernish tint to it. But I'm not trying to be modern. I'm not trying to compete with what's out there these days. But as soon as I then followed Musmation, Jesse Cannon, his name is, his whole take on it was saying, no, don't go looking for fans necessarily. Look for bands who are a little bit above you and try and get on their coattails. So I've got it in front of me, actually. I've got a spreadsheet of essentially psychedelic rock bands, all of whom have had less than, I think they've got less than about 10,000 monthly plays on Spotify. It's a great barometer because it allows you to see where you're at relative to others. And in doing that, I realized that, gosh, there are some huge bands, or huge to me. There's a band called Electric Looking Glass, who, I don't know if you've heard of them. They're from California, and they basically look a bit like the Monkees. They dress like the Monkees, and their music is that kind of Baroque pop, psychedelic rock thing. And I was like, man, they're huge. They're the biggest thing that I know that's completely in this sphere. And then you look at their monthly plays on Spotify and you realize, actually, they're not that much bigger than me. And essentially what I did, just to finish this part of the story, I put together a playlist of all these bands, about 20 bands, about an hour's worth of material. And I called it Under the Radar Psychedelic Rock, because it's under the radar. Most people, including myself, who's actually writing psychedelic rock music, don't know a lot of these bands. And I put the playlist together, and I'm kind of finding my feet with social media. It's something that we've all got to do, and some of us are better at it than others. I'm still learning. I'm just at the moment trying to get my head around TikTok, because everything's I need to get into TikTok.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. But anyway, on Instagram, I tagged all these bands that I've put on this playlist. And it was like a party on my Instagram account, because all these bands were coming to me, thanking me for including them. And of course, the playlist it's got a bunch of likes, not thousands and thousands or anything like that. It's all very small beer, but it's good to kind of reach out to them and, as I say, step on the coattails of them, and then they're retweeting my playlist, and each time other people are seeing it and their fans are seeing it, and of course my track's the first one on the playlist, obviously.
In regards to what you said before about finding a niche, right? I mean, you've come back after, because you got like you said the life kind of came to meet you. You kind of had to do a lot of stuff after you kind of left your teens, right? Do you want to find a niche, or do you want to keep exploring different genres and styles?
I suppose, I mean, over the years, I was in my 20s, I was in a failed Britpop band. We were never signed. Our music was kind of Britpop because that's what was going on at the time. And so that was the indie rock stuff that I was writing with a colleague back then. Since then, when I write a song, I don't start by thinking, I don't write to order, if you like. It's just whatever flows out of me. And so I've got country songs, I've got electronic dance music songs, I've got I've got hard rock songs, folk songs, and I think I realised that after the first track came out, Images of Imogen, and then I released Mankind and Destiny, which was really a completely different vibe to it. And one reviewer described me as genre fluid, which I thought was quite a good expression, not least that it's often gender fluid that people talk about these days. And whilst that is a thing, I am kind of trying to, certainly for this first phase in which I've got 10 songs professionally mixed and mastered, and I'm trying to keep it within a kind of psychedelic rock feel, even though it's not really, because I think that in order to understand who you're trying to attract in terms of your ultimate audience, if you spread yourself too widely, then I don't know that that's the best way of doing it. It's different if if you've got a substantial following, or if you're in a different musical sphere. But for where I am, I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not. I'm trying to be authentic. I'm not going out. I'm not chasing, sending things off to playlists. And at the moment, I've just surpassed 200 monthly listeners on Spotify. And to me, that's just huge, because I've deliberately not included friends and family in that. So every one of those 200 or 220 people is somebody that it digs the music and is into the music. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because honestly, like a quarter of the people I review have admitted paying for views on their Spotify and stuff like that. And it's surreal. Like, how do you think the industry has changed? What are the big changes since when you started and where you are now?
Well, I mean, from I don't think you can even compare it from the 90s, that, it was still CDs. Vinyl was dying. Vinyl's now coming back. It's all about, I think it's about story more than anything else. When I look at social media, whether it's things on Twitter or Instagram, the things that elicit responses, elicit engagement, it's not saying stream my song. It's those people who are trying to provide either education, like to an extent that's kind of what you do in some of your walks of life in terms of educating people on the training side of music. There's obviously entertainment, which either makes people interested, laugh, comedy, or there's just straight ahead content which maybe doesn't fit within any kind of particular niche. I think nowadays it is about engaging your audience. Unlike any time in the past, even today's big pop stars and rock stars, I think fans expect to be able to respond to their social media, to engage with them a lot more. Whereas yesteryear, it was like they were on a pinnacle up here and there wasn't any route into to being able to speak to them or interact with them. The internet has just made it, it's like it's a horizontal plane now, depending on the mindset of the record companies or the performers themselves. Different people are better or not so good at that engaging. And for me, I think that there hasn't been a better time really to be making a living through doing independent music, because it's a flat playing structure. My website, not that it actually does, but my website can look like Lady Gaga's website or Billie Eilish's website if I wanted it to. It's not, apart from maybe some of the more technical things, but it's a level playing field now, and that's why it's exciting. It's exciting to be doing this.
Yeah, like when do you think that the scales started to shift in favor of independent artists?
It's a good question. I think for me, I mean, I was at the turn of the century, I was into Napster. I couldn't believe that you could just think of songs that you'd remember from years ago and just type it through a few things into the internet and you'd download the track. And I was doing that. Everybody was doing that. And I kind of had an argument with when they kind of pulled it away and they started suing little grannies in Nashville because they downloaded a track that they didn't even realize that that's what they'd done. And I always, and my friends, I've got a good music based number of people that I speak with. And we always thought that didn't actually make sense, because they were trying to stop us from downloading for free. But the good stuff that we downloaded, well, then we would go out and see the bands and buy their merchandise, which had we not downloaded it in the first place, we would never have done that. So for the way that we were doing it, we were kind of like ethical, felt that we were doing it the right way. If we didn't like the stuff, then okay, well, we don't like it, but there's so much great stuff out there. Then with Spotify coming along, Apple Music to a slightly lesser extent, I think that music, it's a commodity now, isn't it? It's a free commodity. It's following the same subscription model that so many things are in life, you know, whether it's Netflix or your groceries that you get, and so when did it actually change? I think it's been a gradual process over the last maybe 10 years that has changed it. You know, if you asked me 8 years ago, we'd probably be talking about, well, when we went to Web 2.0, but even that's like a thing of the past now. It's because everything's in high definition. It's like I read somewhere saying something along the lines of that, had it not been for World War II, we'd have had Elvis in HD, all the grainy 1950s footage of Elvis and Buddy Holly would have been in HD. The Beatles and the Stones would have been on a Instagram and Facebook of the day. And it's just one of those things, just technology. It's just like a massive, crazy thing that's, if you embrace it and if you want to use it, as I say, I try to stick with piano and guitar and write my songs without using computers too much, but I will use them. I do use MIDI from time to time, and it's one of those things. It's what if there are tools out there that makes it easier for either me or somebody starting out in their musical career, bring it on, I say.
Yeah, that's a really mature way of handling it, because the reality is it is just so much easier for people to produce music nowadays. Especially, like, how do you reckon the costs have gone down from like recording even a single like from 10 years ago?
Oh gosh, when did I went into the studio. I was in a blues band in the mid 90s, and to go into a studio to lay down, I think we did a 3 or 4 track EP, and it seemed like just so much money that I can't remember what it was, but it was an awful lot to have to, you know, go into a studio, hire an engineer. We didn't know what we were doing, so we had to be, we probably spent twice as long as we needed to had we just been a bit more comfortable in a strange clinical environment. Nowadays, you know, the price of even the computers, I think the guitars are probably about the same price, but the hardware, all this stuff, you know, doing your mixing in the box, you're just using a computer with all your compressors and your reverb and your EQs, and being able to do all that. And then even at one point I did, before I met Edan, I was using online mastering service to where you send your track off and it looks at the algorithms of hundreds of thousands of other music tracks and kind of works out where you're at and gives you a pretty damn close to mastering engineer quality mix. Now, you may disagree. I think you are mixing and mastering engineer as well. And
No, I don't disagree at all. I think that it makes a lot of sense because if you think about certain aspects of like mixing and mastering, some of it is just identifying parts of the frequency spectrum that might be peaking a little bit. Maybe it senses resonant frequencies and it cuts them down a little bit, you know? It knows approximately the amount of reverb that a track would need in order to sound professional. There are parts, of course, which I can imagine an algorithm would be able to do fine. I think it's just competition, right? And I think it's a good thing, because for people like you and me, if we decided to go to a studio, they just can't take the piss anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a story speaking to another producer colleague who had worked with this independent artist, and the artist had decided, a little bit like you're saying, some of your interviewees paying for followers or paying for listens. This artist had decided to have the mastering done at Abbey Road in London. That they now have a service whereby you send the track and they master it remotely. And thinking, I want to do that just so that I can say that it was mastered in Abbey Road, which is like, I totally get that, totally get this kind of the sort of social status that may give you. As it turned out, the independent masterer, as it was, the artist decided that the independent engineer did a better job than Abbey Road, and I was like, yes. And that goes to your point exactly.
I mean, like, Abbey Roads probably has a type of tone that they prefer. You know, they have a type of tone that they think it needs to sound like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, like, some of the music I listen to is incredibly heavy, like really heavy down-tuned guitars and stuff, and you can't mix and master that the same way that you would mix other genres. So I can believe what you're saying. Some engineers are just better suited for certain genres. They have niches.
And equally, that's probably where it must be difficult, I think, for younger people starting out, where they may get a track mixed and mastered professionally, then they release it, and then before they know it, they're getting DMs on Twitter and IG saying, "Hey man, I'm a professional mastering engineer. I can make it sound better for you." And I had that on my first track. It's like, it's subjective. What it sounds like to your ears compared to my ears, compared to everybody else's ears, obviously there's a certain level where it needs to have a certain level of quality. And it's like you picked up on, I think the most recent track you felt had a slight uptake in the quality of the production at the beginning compared to some of the earlier tracks, which is cool. But if you've got younger musicians starting out, it must be difficult when there's the internet, great as it is, there are a lot of scammers out there as well.
Oh yeah. Oh,
we've all met them, haven't we?
And it's because it's a zero-sum game. It's a lot of people fighting over $5 or $10 at a time. And I mean, Spotify shuts down accounts if it knows that you've paid for streams, because it's paying out. It will shut you down. And these young artists, as you're saying, I agree with you completely, Mike. You know, they'll just get disintegrated, and they won't deserve it. But they'll just be like, they might have not have enough. They might just be like teenagers who have just started putting stuff on SoundCloud, and they get this offer, and maybe their parents gave them a bit of money to spend on like a PayPal account, and then boom, they're just screwed.
It's there are pluses and minuses to it. What's great is that there's a lot of love for music still. There's countless genres of music. Anybody can find, if they look hard enough, good music in the genre that they like. And I don't doubt there's going to be a constant supply of people feeding that particular niche with that sort of music. Yeah, it's competitive. It's 60,000 tracks uploaded to Spotify every day. I'm not anticipating any editorial playlisting at any point at any point soon. Be nice if you get it. But again, there's an argument that says, well, you do that, then it's gonna mess with the actual Spotify algorithm, because if it puts you, let's say it took one of my tracks and puts it in a editorial playlist that isn't actually psychedelic rock, being that, say, my first track, Images of Imaging, is psychedelic rock, then it can actually do you less favors down the line. Yeah, you'll get that massive hike in short-term listenership, which will feed people's egos and make you feel good about yourself. But the way that I've decided to do it is just to do it entirely organically and let it build by being active on social media. As I say, speaking to different bands, reaching out to them. There's no shortage of bands out there that you can speak to, and particularly the independent ones tend to, you realize that they think like like I do. And just because they're got a bit further up, they've been doing it for a bit longer. There's still great bands out there, and you can just sort of see the trajectory. And as I have done since Imogen was released.
There you are. Cool. Hello. I like your sort of authenticity in regards to the way you approach it. It's great that you're not treating this as like a race. Like you're taking your time to release these tracks. How do you think you're gonna sort of release and schedule these other tracks on your set list at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm hoping that my next track, I'm hoping that by the end of I can get it out by the end of January 2022. And it's one of those things with every release, I learn more. So when I first released Images of Imogen in September 2020, in the heart of COVID, it was my first proper release, and there was just so many things that I hadn't done. I was trying out Facebook adverts. I'd been on a course, and it's very complicated. And the amount of time that I had to be able to devote to understand and adjust it and tweak it was such that it wasn't really for me. By the time of the second release was a month later, so I started sort of guns blazing, sort of like September, October, November, December. That was my plan. When Mankind and Destiny came out, I hadn't finished the music video for it, or I had finished it, but it was pants. It just wasn't. It was self-produced, and I wasn't happy with it, and so I didn't have a music video that I was willing to share. On other ones, what didn't I do? So like just this Friday when the last track came out, I managed to work out what I was going to say on Instagram, and I did some like behind the scenes bits and clips and stuff, and a little bit of stuff of us fooling around when we did the music video, and that worked really well and got some nice feedback for that. But because I was focusing on that, I kind of didn't put anything on Twitter. Twitter is really my main social media account. I've just gone over about 10,000 followers, and thank you. And I still haven't had a chance to do it. And it's like, yeah, it's scheduling and planning, and there's so much, even to the extent of like, have you come across Music Brains? If you put it in your stories, it populates with the lyrics, and also it probably rings a bell. Maybe it's not Music Brains, or maybe they've changed the name of it. But there's various other things, like, so that when you say, Alexa, play Mankind and Destiny by Tash Hagz, there's certain things back end that you've got to do in order for it to know it. And there's all this background stuff, and it's like, in a way, I've only got 200 people. I'm looking at it the other way now. I've only got 200 people who are listening to me on Spotify. So it's not the end of the world that I haven't got, all my ducks quite in a row yet.
It's also quite impressive that you've got that many people listening to you, considering the competition that you mentioned earlier. So genuinely well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was going to ask more about the recording process for these, because you mentioned that you work with acoustic instruments, right? Mm-hmm. Did you want to describe the recording process for these tracks, any one of them, or overall?
Essentially, I mean, just generally speaking, I've got a back catalogue of, I think it's anything between 300 or 400 songs written over the years. And these 10 that I've kind of randomly picked are exactly that. I didn't pick them to be all the same type of song. I use a package called Cubase. I've got an Apple Mac set up, and it's probably about 10 years ago I started to really knuckle down and start learning about how to balance and what compression meant and equalization. One of my biggest regrets is that I've never had a music lesson in my life, and I so wish that I had, because I would be so much better. My guitar technique could be so much better. I'm a little bit frumpy on the piano. Is that a word? Frumpy. You could argue that if I'd have had a formal music education, then I'd maybe be following more of the rules, and some of the tracks that I've done, and certainly some that I haven't even released yet, they've got kind of maybe not your typical arrangements. I've got a track that's possibly my next track called Pools of Rainbows, and it's got intro, verse, chorus, Hammond organ break, pre-chorus, chorus, second verse. It's just all over the place. But for me and Eden, it works perfectly. And so in a nutshell, to describe my recording process is it's just chaos. It's just chucking things down, seeing what happens, stop chopping things, starting new things. And I have actually got another album's worth of material that needs to go through the same quality assurance checks with Edan. And even with the last stuff, when I met, it was 2014, I'd done the Into My Arms demo recording, as I mentioned, with input from Victor James. I decided at the end of that year, look, I do want to take this more seriously. I say I haven't had the one lessons that I have, although some people might think that that's the one lesson that I haven't had, is I've had vocal lessons. I did a set of vocal lessons for during 2015, 16. And then at the end of 16, I reached out to 3 producers that I got in touch with, 2 who I'd worked with before on Into My Arms, and Edan Altman, who I found online. He sort of billed himself as a minimalistic producer. He had been taught by Alan Parsons from Dark Side of the Moon. So I thought, well, if you've been, he went to Abbey Road and was under his tutelage for a period. And I thought, well, you know, Alan Parsons, Dark Side of the Moon, you don't really get better engineering than that. So if you're one of his disciples, I bow down to you. And if you're willing to work with me, bring it on. And for about a year's period, back and forth, you know, emailing stuff, tracks. They were pretty much all produced in the main. There were a few that, like Images of Imogen, that Edan really picked up on and did an awful lot of work with. But yeah, in a nutshell, quite chaotic. I don't have a formulaic approach. And I think that's maybe why I'm sometimes described as genre fluid.
But that's okay though. Like, would you recommend that all sort of artists who are wanting to sort of make progress in their musical careers find a producer of some kind to sort of collaborate with?
Well, yes and no. It depends on your level of competence. It's like we said earlier. It can be very easy to be very insular, and once you listen to a sound, you'll know it from mixing that you've got to have a break. You've got to go away and hear something different. If you just sit in your mixing desk for 9 hours straight, your ears play funny things after a little while, and you know it takes a level of both reading, studying, and doing it to realize that that's actually true. And so for younger people out there, go with what you know. There are some. I've used them in the past. There are some good market research tools out there. Reverb Nation, for example, they've got, I think it's called Crowd Review, and you can take your track. Maybe it costs £30-40. So I don't know what that is in New Zealand dollars or anything else, but not mega bucks. But you can maybe spend $30 and get 50 people who you don't know listen to it and give you feedback. And that really helped me early on to understand what other people would taking from my music. You've got to have a thick skin. There's a lot of uninformed feedback that you can get. So I'm not saying go out and do it, but some of the stuff that for the one track, one person might say, in fact, I can remember it. His vocals sound like a drunk dog that's dying at the side of a pavement. A drunk dog? I mean, come on. Whereas another reviewer said, love the vocals, kind of Lennon meets Dylan. And it's like, I'll have that. Maybe less the Dylan bit, but...
That's awesome. Like, you sound like you've got a really healthy situation going with this producer and your sort of songwriting and production process. 300 to 400 songs is quite a lot, though. What would you say your main inspirations for these songs would be?
It's as if it's a force within me that I can't control. I've tried to stop writing songs on a few occasions in my life, and I can't. I'm one of these people that's lucky that I can wake up with melodies. I can wake up in the night with melodies, and I've got to reach for my phone and into it and just to capture it, or I can wake up in the morning with a melody. And some songs, Images of Imogen being one of them, I woke up with the line. The first line is, the quips I used to make now generate no laugh, and I had that, and it's funny now it's kicking around somewhere. You know, it's on a voice memo on my iPhone from yesteryear. What do I hope to achieve with them? I hope that I'm able to get quicker at releasing these things, because I do enjoy the challenge. I do it for me really, rather than for other people. It's just that I've now kind of reached this. I've reached a position where the quality is such that I'm confident enough, with external help, to release it and put it out there. And it's great that I get, you know, like some of the feedback that you've been given me and others, people saying, you know, this is a cracking song. It's really, really well written. And it's like, thank you. I thought so as well. But the fact that it's somebody else who's not me, brilliant. It makes me want to do it more.
Speaking of like releasing songs, how is the live scene where you are? How are things going in regards to shows and stuff?
It's a difficult one, really. At the moment, it seems like COVID is creeping back up again in England. I live in the West Midlands near Birmingham, and it's quite a hot spot as well. There've been a number of things cancelled. There's certainly a desire for bands to get out there and perform, but then anecdotally speaking to a few people, they're gigging and they're not gigging in front of as many people as they would have hoped to, because there's still that people are scared of going out and just don't really know what's around the corner, don't know that they're going to go and get it and, you know, pass it on to their parents or their grandparents or other vulnerable people. It's sad. I think it'll come back. We're currently going through our third vaccination. We've all had 2 vaccinations, everybody over a certain age, and now we're having these so-called winter booster vaccinations. What are you guys? Because I know you managed it properly in New Zealand, didn't you?
Yeah. Basically, at the moment, we're all trying to get to 90% double vaccinated so that we can like open up for Christmas, because our main city that has the international airport is still in a lockdown, and it has been for like 2.5 months. Right. And people are getting really, really frustrated about it. I mean, I'm double vaxxed, and I'm glad, if only because I'll be able to travel at some point, right? You know, like,
yeah.
But we've still got a way to go, because there's a few people who are very much like, we want to enjoy the freedom, but we don't want to get the vaccination. So it's just kind of, we're just waiting on those guys to decide what they want to do.
It's funny talking about Edan and COVID. It was March, just before we went into lockdown, March 23rd, 2020 in the UK. I had made arrangement with Edan. He's based in the Netherlands. I'd never met him. And we'd finished all the tracks, and he had mastered them, but he wanted me to be present doing a final master so that we could he had my input. So it was 2 weeks before everything was locked down in Europe that I managed to get on a flight and go out to the Netherlands and meet him, go to his studio, and we went out for a nice meal afterwards, got some great work done there. And had it been any other date, then I might not be sat here speaking to you, because it probably wouldn't have been mastered in time, and the whole thing would have been curtailed, postponed. Very lucky.
Yeah, I'm fantastic. It's fantastic to hear that you guys had the opportunity to do that before things kind of slow down a little bit, you know? Where do you see yourself going in future then?
In a lot of ways, I would like to. I've worked full time. I would like to retire. I've got probably another 15 years before I can do that. I would like to see. I've got we adopted a little boy in 2017. He's now 12. as he becomes a bit more independent, and we're also looking to relocate. My actual studio has not been a studio. This is kind of like a makeshift studio, and you can see various bits and pieces around, but it's also where I work. And I would like to think that we relocate next year out into the countryside, away from Birmingham, away from COVID, nice big room where I can re-establish my musical hardware, software, and have a presence there, and really make it so that I'd like to see an album a year. That in a way, it's like doing these singles. I've got the 10 tracks. I could have just released an album, bang. But because I'm learning so much with each individual release, I don't see that I would necessarily go for an album. It's like it's a kind of, and a lot of the thinking these days is, particularly if you're a kind of grounds root level artist, it doesn't make sense to do an album, because it's like you release it all in one big shot. There's a bit of a fanfare for that, and then everybody moves on. Whereas, well, if you can do that 10 times, maybe wrap it into an album at the end, which is what I intend to do. And I would like to get it on vinyl as well. So yeah, in an ideal world, an album a year and do it on, have a vinyl, a small production run of vinyl as well. And if I continue to grow the way I am doing, then it will be something I should have some more supporters and some more fans that will help to finance that realization.
It sounds beautiful, and I'm glad that you're doing some physical copies as well, because vinyl's important. Vinyl's pretty dope, eh?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things, it's even if nothing were to come of it, and let's say I get 250 pressed and I've still got 17 lying around in my garage. It's like it's a milestone, isn't it? And it's much more a milestone if you do the vinyl than if it's just a sort of wishy-washy digital thing that's ones and.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree, and I wish you the best of luck with it. It sounds like you've got it all planned out, and I hope it goes really well. Was there, just before we finish for the day, was there anything else you wanted to tell the people here about where they can find your music and stuff like that? Where can we go listen to your tunes?
I'm on all streaming platforms. I'm on pretty much most social media platforms, some a lot more active than others. I'm fortunate in that my name, Tash Hagz, that's Hagz Z with a Z at the end, Hagz. That's, nobody had ever thought of that strange spoonerism before. So my handle is just Tash Hagz everywhere. If you just type in Tash Hagz into Google, you will find me, because there's nobody else got that name, and you'll be able to hook up through that means.
Fantastic. Well, Tash Hagz, aka Mike Shields, thank you very much for coming in for the chat today, the SB interviews, and I hope that you have a fantastic day and best of luck in future.
Many thanks, Logan. Great to hook up.
Cheers.
You take care.
You too. See you later. And that was my interview with Tash Hagz, aka Mike Shields. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this interview. I enjoyed chatting to Mike. Mike is one of the most down-to-earth people I've ever sort of spoken to. He's got a love of music, a passion for it, a heart of gold. He's incredibly dedicated to his songwriting, and his music is, as I've previously reviewed his music, I think his music's really stellar. And the fact that he is getting some attention for his music at this point in time is really promising. He deserves the love. He deserves your love. So please do go check out his music at the various social media links in the description for this video, and go check him out via his various social medias, and stay cool, stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on. Catch you in next interview. Spider Hens out.